This week's edition of Bowling Evolved is brought to you by BowlingIllustrated.com and TVSRadioNetwork.com. TVS Network, for over 50 years, bringing you the best in sports broadcasting. Hello, bowling fans. This is Dustin J. Markowitz coming to you, taped as always from the gem along the Colorado River, Fort Mojave, Arizona, on location here in Elite Pro Shop, bringing you yet another rendition of your favorite bowling talk show, Bowling Evolved. Join me, as always, is my partner in crime. He's the 5-time PBA national champion. I don't have any crazy Spanish nicknames for him this week, so I'm just going to bring him in, the one and the only, Eric Forkel. Eric, how's it going, buddy?
What? No Spanish today? What's going on? What, are you sick? Something wrong?
I know. I've got nothing. Del Roja Burro, the Red Donkey. That's going to be your nickname.
Okay. Hola, ¿qué tal? All right, let's go. Let's get this thing rolling. We got people to talk to, places to go, things to say. Let's do it.
Absolutely. Well, last week we definitely had some unique feedback to our show. In case you did not catch it, we had some critical talk about the USBC National. In particular, my father, Brian Markowitz, had come on the show to discuss a little bit about his thoughts. And Eric, you and I had shared our thoughts on what we had seen from the bowlers. And obviously, we did not make everyone happy. We did get a lot of real positive feedback for it, mainly for us stating what a lot of bowlers seem to think. But again, we need to explain, I think, the position of the show, which has been the same since we got started. We are a talk show by real bowlers for real bowlers. And when Eric and I first got to start about 4.5 years ago, we didn't want to be the hardcore news center for bowling because that's not what we were. We wanted to be the guys, when you were done bowling, you were at the bar having a beer with your friends, you were talking about the sport. You were in the pro shop, getting your ball resurfaced, talking with your pro shop tech. That's what we were hoping to do. And Eric, I think you and I have done a pretty good job with that over the years.
Well, that's been the game plan since day one, and it hasn't changed now. Obviously, we have opinions, just like everybody else in a talk show. And again, this is our opinions, and we're going to express them. And if somebody disagrees, you are more than welcome to come on this show, and we'll discuss it. That's what it's all about. Good discussion. And we may not always agree, but it'll be a great conversation. And we're talking bowling, and that's what it's all about.
Yes, very much so. And I am very disappointed to say that no one from USBC National will be on the show this week, although we do still have a very open invitation to anyone from USBC National. Our job was not to rag or to say USBC was a terrible organization, as some people seem to think that was our stance, but rather we were just making critical remarks about what come to us as people in the industry, as a journalist, as a pro shop tech, as a manager, whatever the case is. This is what is brought to our attention. I would like to make a couple little remarks here. First off, I'd like to make a correction. One thing that was brought to my attention is that I had made the statement that 10 to 12,000 bowlers had bowled at Nationals last year, or this year rather. I had meant to actually say 10 to 12,000 teams had participated in Nationals, and I believe the actual figure was 8,063, or around that figure, so a little over 8,000. But the point that I was making was that was not so much, how many bowlers went out there in number figures, but rather it's still a very small percentage in comparison to the around 2 million league bowlers that participate in USBC. My statement was more or less saying that I felt that National in many ways had put so much time, energy, money, and focus on the national event that local resources, as has been said to me by my local association, as Eric has heard, as my dad has heard, that they were making complaints about what National is and isn't doing. I know that the statement when I had said that National was founded with organizing the local bodies, yes, I understand it's based on services, standards, resources, and being a governing body for the sport. But without local associations, without state associations, there is no national USBC. There is no National Bowling Alliance that we could all be part of. And, I know there are many reasons why people don't bowl. I know the economy is not the greatest. I know things have shut down. Bowling centers have shut down. But the fact remains that open play remains popular, and yet a lot of these bowlers still do not bowl league. I will continue to argue that more focus and resources need to be put into directly growing bowling with the local associations. And yes, I understand there are a lot of programs that USBC National does, many of which, Eric, that you and I know we're big fans of, including what they do with the collegiate program. However, until someone from USBC National comes on our show to better explain their viewpoint or the facts, as it were, I have to remain with how I look at the state of the sport as is. And, Eric, I have to say, I know that you see it from the same perspective I do, and until I see otherwise, I don't think we can change how we feel.
No, and I agree, and I like kind of what your dad said last week. He'd be more than willing, as a proprietor and as a bowling center manager who deals with this day in and day out, he would be more than willing to debate or discuss with anybody from the USBC to get his point across and then maybe give them what they're trying to do, because maybe there is a place to meet in the middle. But until that, that's about it. So, if you don't like what we say, come on here and let's discuss it. And if you do like what we say, then you're more than willing to continue to look. Because what am I going to tell you? It's just an opinion. You either like it or you don't.
I was going to say our 14 fans still seem to like what we do, so maybe we'll grow that number a few more.
I didn't think we had that many. I thought it was like 9 or 10, and that's beside my dogs who I pay to listen. So it is what it is. So with that being said, the disclaimer, whatever you want to call it, let's move on to something that's a lot more fun.
Oh, I completely agree. And since we are definitely, as we said before, the bad boys of bowling broadcasting, it seems to become more and more true, and we get into the controversial side of the sport, I would like to introduce our guest, who is no stranger to controversy himself. He is a 3-time PBA national champion, and of course, he won his last title at the Don Carter PBA Classic in 1999, and also in that year was the 14th man ever to shoot 300 on television, the one, the only, Mike Miller. Mike, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, thanks for having me.
Oh, Dad, it's so nice to have Dad's little buddy on the show.
Yeah, everybody needs to understand Dad's little buddy. That's exactly right.
Is there a story we can share for our audience in regards to that statement?
Not in a million years. Not in a million years.
It was mostly related to my stepson, and he was when we used to all travel together and go round and round all over the road with our RVs, and there was a crew of us that kind of hung out together, and it was fun. We had a good time.
Back when the tour was a real tour, there used to be most of the guys out there ran around in a motorhome, and they had their families out there, and they almost like a little trailer park, and it was interesting. It was the trailer park behind the bowling center, and it was like its own little community, a traveling community from week to week. That went on like in the 70s, the 80s, and obviously the 90s, and then little by little it went away, because of everything that happened out there, but it was pretty cool. You go, a lot of the guys would like to stay in hotels, but then those guys would just, boom, they're right behind the bowling center, and they, Mike did that with his family, and a lot of guys did, and it was just a blast. They had great times. Yep.
We had a lot of laughs, and then we had some issues with the gray water and the black water and different things that happen in parking lots and so on and so forth. We could go on with that too, and I won't, but it was
RV travel had to be interesting. RV travel was I heard some good stories. I never went that direction, but I heard the stories from Petrilli and a few of the other guys, and like in the winter when things would freeze up, and things aren't going good, or when your potty thing isn't going right, and
you better be a very handy man, and I do mean that in the most sincerest of forms, because those things were, they were not meant to be beaten across or back and forth across the country. I mean, RVs are good when you take them to a spot, kind of slowly and then park them. They're not meant to be just, hooked up. I mean, even the diesel pushers, it requires somebody that really is handy, like I said, and I learned as I went, you know what I mean? I got tired of paying the rate going to the shop, so I learned on my own, because otherwise it was going to break me.
Yeah, it was, like I said, that was a different world out there, and that was back when, I still say, and I'm sure Mike would agree, the tour was really a tour. It was an actual traveling tour that went from stop to stop, week to week, and you knew different parts of the country. When you got there, you knew people from the year before, and it was like family, and it was something special that I don't think will ever return. And I mean, Mike, I'm sure he felt the same way.
Well, I did. I mean, you go to different parts of the country, and like you said, you run into different people that had followed you the year before, and you made friends with them, and then those same people would come back year after year after year and be there and root for you. I mean, it was awesome. I really appreciated those folks. I didn't have too many of them, but I did see I had some, and I know Eric had some, and of course the more star-oriented guys had quite a few, throughout the country. And people showed up, every week. It's the same stops, the stops where we were established, where we had gone year after year after year, even before the years where I was out there. There was stops that had been established for a long time, and it was just, it was a rush to get out there when I was a kid. I wasn't very good then when I first started, but boy, I tell you, just being around that environment, it was awesome. I was very fortunate to see that.
I was going to say, that's a great starting point for this, too, because, as we said, you were definitely known as one of the most controversial players when you pulled your thumb out of the bowling ball in the beginning of the 90s. And kind of walk us through that. What led you to experimenting with it, and what was the feedback you received once you actually started using it full time?
Well, basically, I started, I bowled a few tournaments in 80, and then I started in 81 and bowled on till the middle of 83 until I hurt my hand. I hurt my tendons in my hand, so I had to take almost a year off then. So it was on to other things at that point. But in the 80s, it was mostly back and forth. I would try different things. I was fortunate. I had a good family, and my mother believed in me, and my father did too. But I had a couple people, some doctors that believed in me, and I just would go out throughout the 80s. After the 81, 82, 83 period, I would go out for 6 to 10 tournaments, maybe try something else, think that I had something figured out, and I went to many different lengths. Eric can attest to this himself, I'm sure. I mean, when you're hungry to try to get there, I mean, I was willing to do anything, just about, and tried many different things. The problem was I was a straighter player. I didn't have enough. I had some power. I wasn't gifted with tremendous touch, so my ability to be deadly accurate wasn't as good as some, and I didn't have the power. And as time went along, and then urethane came along, I was behind the 8 ball there, and we get to 1989 in the summer, 90, excuse me, I was about tapped out. And it was about time and I called home and I just said, hey, I'm going to try one more thing before I'm done with this deal, because I feel like if I don't do it, I'll always wonder. And my parents were like, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to take my thumb out of it and throw it. And they were like, what? And I said, I'm telling you, I've got about as good as I can get this other way, and it's not enough. I can't beat these guys. I can maybe make some top 24s and get some checks. And as I get older, who knows, maybe I'll get more experience and maybe luck into something. But I don't see anything where I could dominate. And so they said, well, if that's what you want to do, go for it. So I did. The reception was mild at best because it was in Oklahoma. It was a summer stop that was our richest summer tour stop in 90 at Edmonds. And most guys were like, why don't you just do this at a cheaper tournament? Why are you doing it here? And I was like, why not here? I mean, why not? Because what does it matter? You know, and I ended up, at the time we were bowling 8-game blocks. They had the long format there. And so I got to bowl 24 games that way, and I think I missed cashing by about 50. And so I was like, wow, that's not bad, you know. I mean, I could, you know, I had definitely a lot more strike power. I only drilled 2 balls, and I bowled all 24 that way, and I was fine. I was like, wow, that's cool. So then the next week I went to Austin, and I got a check. So I was just really stoked then. I mean, I was like, wow, I could see this happening. And then I bowled one more tournament in Wichita that summer. Didn't get a check, struggled, and I thought, okay, I got work to do. And so then it kind of progressed from there, and it went on. And I wish often, you know, we've talked about this before. I wish often that I had started that process 5-6 years earlier, because I would have had a longer run with just urethane. And when Eric mentioned to me that when Reactive came out, it probably didn't do me any favors. No, it didn't, because I was just tacking on a urethane. I mean, getting all I could get on a urethane ball, and it was working. You know what I mean? So there wasn't a whole lot of, I mean, I had some touch to it, but I was throwing it to a spot. That's a fact. So, and I played the lanes different ways, but it wasn't rocket science. You know, I mean, I didn't go from being a journeyman player to all of a sudden striking like crazy. And still being able to make spares. I think that's kind of what set me apart, is I could put my thumb in it for spares and still moderately get around if I didn't have a good strike shot. So that helped me a lot.
I got a question, Mike. Did you do it before Benoit, or was it the other way around?
No, he was before me.
He was
before me, but he always had his thumb in it, but you know, he was doing that thing where he was leaving the holes real sharp and barely holding it, you know, just kind of resting it on his wrist. I believe he was double 20.
I couldn't remember if he put it in there or not. Obviously it's okay. So he had his thumb in the ball a little bit. Okay.
He did, but he was, you know, and that worked great because he could float it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And with urethane, he threw it great. But he didn't have very much ball speed. I mean, how many guys do you see now with that kind of rev rate out there having success?
Oh, they're 20, 21 miles an hour. Oh.
Who throws it 14, 15 miles an hour and curves the lane and gets it to hit? Nobody. Yeah,
Nobody. No one.
Those days are over.
Well, I was going to say, let's step ahead just a hair here and look at the 1991 PBA National. Now, of course, some people would say you shocked the world when you beat Norm Duke and you won the major. And tell us, what was kind of going through your mind at that time? I mean, obviously you've been doing it for a little while at that point. You were seeing some success, and now you find yourself arguably against one of the superstars, and eventually, Hall of Famer Norm Duke, and at that time still one of the greatest, always will be one of the greatest bowlers ever. But what was going through your mindset? What was your thought process going into that event?
Well, I was real happy. I had bowled good all week that week, and I had been in the top pretty much throughout and led it at certain parts. And then I struggled the last day match play, and only the last 4 or 5 games did I figure something out, and then made it back up to second. So I was happy with myself with that. But as far as who I was going to bowl, I'd already made. I'd led a tournament earlier in the year. I led the Showboat, and I lost that one to our buddy Dave Ozio, who had won the very first event. He'd won the first event of the year, and then he won Showboat as well. So he started off the year winning back-to-back, and that was his bowler of the year as well in 91. So it was good for him. I was pretty sour about the Showboat because that's not what I bowled on all week when we bowled for the cheese the last game, and I was proud of myself. I think I shot 210 or 220, but David had 270 and played him. David's a great bowler, and he took advantage of what was there, and that's that. I'm not, it was what it was. That happened to a lot of guys, and really, basically, if you're a professional, you just adapt. I mean, and those things happened. They happened to many, they happened to guys a lot that made shows, a lot more shows than I did. You know what I mean? Guys that were continually on there. It happened all the time. So you just kind of always learn to expect that. When I got to Toledo, I just wanted to get a chance. I just was really hoping to get a chance to bowl for the title again. It didn't matter if it was a major or not. I didn't care. I just wanted a chance to bowl for the Cheese again. And when we got there, Norm bowled a tremendous game. I don't think he missed a pocket, maybe once. I missed the pocket several times. When Brooklyn, in the 8th and 9th, I got the right lane down, which was the 8th. I went over to the left lane, and I tripped the 2. And I was like, wow, that's a huge break. And no matter what he did at that point, I had my own destiny in my hands. So he did get up and strike out. So it forced me to get 2 in the 10th to beat him, which was, I had the right lane finally figured out again. It took me a while throughout that game. But in the 8th, and then the 2 shots in the 10th, I sucked the 10 out twice, and they were good, it was right. The 10 was over in the 7 hole, so I was happy about that, and it was almost surreal. It was hard to believe. I was almost from the outside looking in when I won. I was kind of in zone land, really. I was so focused on what I wanted to do. I knew that if I let myself for a moment be in the moment, I would probably not perform the way I needed to. So I had to keep myself real balanced on what I was doing and keep it simple and just focus on that. That's it.
It's an amazing story. And ladies and gentlemen, we are closing in on our first break. Stick around. We'll have more with Mike Miller right after this. This week's edition of Bowling Evolved is brought to you by BowlingIllustrated.com and TVSRadioNetwork.com. TVS Network, for over 50 years, bringing you the best in sports broadcasting. And welcome back, fans. Mike, that's truly amazing. I find myself as a fan of the PBA. I love hearing these stories and our guests that come on, and just hearing the elation that comes in your voice as you talk about it. And I want to skip ahead a few more years here. Let's talk about 1999. You were the 14th man ever to shoot 300 on TV, and you were in a match against Tim Chris and Danny Wiseman. You and Wiseman were basically going strike for strike, as I remember, with Tim Chris right on your heels. Yeah. Kind of walk us through that one a little bit. What was on your mind? Obviously you're in the heat of the reactive urethane era. What was going through your mind?
Well, it had been 7 years since I'd won, and I'd won in Dallas earlier in the year, so there was a long break in between before I won, so I was real happy that I won again, especially with reactive, because that was a completely different deal to learn how to throw reactive and understanding ball reaction and being more aware of verticality instead of just the horizontal part of the lane, which was how I kind of grew up. But understanding break point and how to affect it, how ball rolls, axis tilt, hand positions, and being able to repeat it, I got better as I went. By the time 99 rolled around, I was 38 years old. So my body wasn't near as good, but my mind was, and my ability to kind of understand what I could do and accept the fact that there was things that I couldn't do, and I accepted that, and I just tried to learn how to best navigate that whenever I went to tournaments. I knew I wouldn't always have a chance to win, but I felt like if I did have a chance, that I could maximize that. I could. My mind was in a better place as I got older, as a lot of guys are. And it's really unusual to see a very young person have a lot of success early, which is what I see now out of some. I'm not sure for what reasons. But some of the kids now are just fantastic. I see that all the time. And in that game, we were going back and forth. You're right. It helped me. I knew that I was striking. I wasn't really thinking about the striking too much. I was thinking that he was putting it right back on me, so I needed to get up there and throw another good shot. And that's really all it was. He was getting up there throwing good shots, and I was trying to get up there and just match it. And Tim left a couple of, we'd kind of broken him down to where right before practice was over for the first match, I didn't even think I was going to throw the ball that I ended up throwing. I threw it one shot on the right lane, and it had been a ball that I had used primarily most of the week. It was an Imperial Quantum But I was like, I don't know, man. I'll try it one time again. I tried it 15 minutes earlier, and it didn't roll very good. And it rolled really good right before that. I said, okay, I'll give it 2 frames. And then I used it. So that's kind of how some stuff went for me out there. I didn't really try to plan it. I just kind of waited until we got toward close to starting time, and then I'd see what I liked, and I'd go with that. So that's how it went. And
I do have a question. I got a quick question. When you in the middle of that game, I noticed you would lick your hand.
Yeah.
And
that wasn't for anything. I just was I'd had some cotton candy on there earlier in the day, and I wanted to make sure that I got it all. No.
Oh my God! Here, I thought it was some great new technique. And it's the cotton candy shot. Okay, all right.
Okay, so reactive bowling balls. Some of them. Not that Imperial Quantum was that way too much, but if I could figure a way to tackify my hand a little bit when I was licking my palm just a little, I didn't have any spit on my hand. Holy smoke, the 10th frame, it was brutal. It was like licking it with dry sponge. I mean, it was horrible. I didn't have anything. It took me quite a while there. But what I was doing was allowing me to have just a little bit of tack on my palm. Because I didn't have a thumb in it, I was always searching for better ways to try to get a grip on it without squeezing it. And as well as I do. Go ahead.
Is that before they had the tacky gloves?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
some of those gloves, I didn't really think, some were tacky, but to me, it just didn't feel like that. It was a real critical thing because I was also trying to balance it.
Right.
And kind of feel where it was and how I wanted it to come off my hand. So if I could get a little bit of tack on my hand to do that, it was much easier. And it wasn't something like I planned on doing. I'd only been doing that for a couple of weeks by the time I got to that. I ended up actually going to the Tom Baker method, which was just having a damp towel with me.
Mm-hmm.
And that worked, like that, it was a lot better. So, but I still do that today sometimes.
I'll tell you what, nothing for nothing. I've seen a lot of the 300 games on TV, and that is by far one of the prettiest 300 games. You just got to see it. It's just awesome.
Kids there too that weekend. They were from Northern California. They were going to bowl after the tour stop was over. They had a weekend tournament, or they had something there going on. So they were just happened to be there. They were all there to watch the television show, so that made it exciting. And it was one of those deals where they were encouraging people to make noise on TV. You know what I mean? So and people sometimes were still kind of confused about it. Sometimes they would, sometimes they wouldn't. You know what I mean? So you'd see different shows with different reactions depending on the part of the country we were in. Some guys figured it out that it was better just to have them start making noise while they got up on the approach, just so they was already going, so they could focus on what they wanted to do. They didn't want them doing it in the middle of their approach. And in that game, starting about the 6th or 7th frame, I don't remember which one, some kid up in the stands decided it was a good idea about maybe my 4th step, right as I was going into my slide, to yell 2 fingers, baby. And if you listen, it's every shot. It's the 6th, 7th, the 8th, the 9th, the 10th, the 11th, the 12th. And I can hear some of those kids back there going, shh, shh. And nope, 2 fingers, baby.
Oh, my God. I'll have to go back and watch it again, see if I can hear it.
It didn't matter. It didn't matter because, you get to a place where when you get on bowling on TV, and Eric can attest to this, I don't know how it was for him, but it was almost like free energy because I was so pumped up. And you're bowling, you're bowling well, so if you've made the TV show, there's not a lot for a lack of confidence. You don't want to be overconfident, but you're bowling good. So you need to focus and do what you did throughout the week and make some good moves and make some shots, and hopefully you get to the end and you have a chance in the 10th. Or you beat them before that's over. That's all I ever asked for, just a chance in the 10th. That's all I ever really wanted. And I didn't mind finishing the match, and Danny was really cool and so was Tim. Those guys were great, and Yeah, I miss those days, and not just that. Or there was a lot more failure associated with my bowling than there ever was success. I mean, I won a whopping 3 times, and I had a 300 game, and I made a smattering of shows, and blah blah blah. But to be honest with you, there was a ton of failure. I mean, it was. They really made you check yourself. There was a lot of guys that went through a lot of hard times. We all saw it. And we all respected each other when we would go through a tough time and come out of it. I mean, we all did. We all knew. And so that's the part of stuff, that's the stuff right there that made me, that's the stuff I miss. I miss the competition. I miss my buddies. And I miss going out there, and we all knew, and when we laced them up and we got out there, we were going to try and knock each other's heads in and then let the chips fall where they may, and then we'd come out. We'd go and eat, or our buddies would, we'd do whatever we do, come back the next day and try to beat each other's heads in again. It was fun.
It was a traveling road show with a bunch of people. It was the same people almost every week. And when you pulled into a town, it was just, let's try it again. It's just, get ready for the next week. And if you didn't bowl well, you hit the lanes and you practice at the end. Practice to get ready for the next week. And it was always, and that's what kept people, that was the drive, because, you wanted to get to TV. Back then, if you made TV, you got incentives on TV. You got a chance to win. You make 2-3 shows, and that's your year. Your year is done. You make up for, it was huge to get to that TV show, and you maybe throw the right ball, and you get paid extra money for this and that. And, man, that's what it was all about. Sure, it's always great to win, but for most of us, getting to the show and then winning was not that simple. It was tough. But if you got to the show, and you knew you were going to make some extra money, and that'll take care of you for the next month or two. And and that kept you going, so you can keep doing what you love and you keep working on things. And I roomed a little bit. I roomed often with Ozio, and he was such a hard worker. And for one of the most beautifulest games ever, he had such a great game. But he put a ton of work into it, just like most of us did. But I mean, these people are workaholics back then. I don't think it would still be like that these days. I'm guessing not, because it's different now. I'm not saying these people don't work on their games, but I think it's changed. And I just know how hard the guys would work every week out there to get ready for the next week. And like I said, if you didn't make the finals, you were out there practicing all day and all afternoon in between the finals, or you went to another bowling center to practice. I mean, it was just practice. It was ridiculous. And
there was a group of about 10 to 15 of us that we were dedicated like that. I'm telling you what, it got to where, I didn't want to be on the practice lanes, but I swear to God, if I wasn't making money, I had to be down there.
Yeah. And you just did. And that was part of the love and what you wanted to do. And, because the goal was to get to that top 5, and there was 150 to 200 guys out there every week, and it was tough. A lot of good things have to go your way. You've got to be throwing it good. You got to carry. You got to pick the right ball. Things are just everything. You got to win your matches. Things have got to go your way to get to that damn show. Certain people had a knack of making way more shows than others, but the ones who, got there, that was half the battle. Then you start all over again on the show. They're most of the time they're dressed differently. There's the hot lights of TV. They very rarely play the same as during the week. I mean, very rarely. And I'm on the left side of the lane, and I got to be honest with you, there was very few times did they play the same, and you would think on the left they would. But there was always, it was like 2 different tournaments. You had one to get there, and then when you get to the show, it starts all over. And I'm again, Mike talked about that earlier, just, with what happened at the Showboat. And I mean, that kind of stuff happened all the time. But if you were the more often you were able to get there, the better chances you had of winning. If you get there once a year, not so good. If you get there 5, 10 times, 15 times, I like your chances. You got more irons in the fire.
No doubt.
The odds are eventually something good is going to happen. I mean, when I won the National in '92, Vespi led the tournament, and then on that tournament, man, on that show, those lanes, we practiced on those lanes from an hour before, and they were so nice. And by the time that TV started, all that oil was pushed to the back of the lane, and my, oh my, they were unbelievably inverted and difficult. And I mean, 190 was a good game, was a real good game. And Vespi had averaged like 230, 240 all week. And he shot like 130 in the final game against me. And I had like 210. I was able to get through everybody, squeak by with a bunch of this and that. And I got to the final game and the match was over in the 6th frame. I mean, it was like a miracle. But I mean, you never expect a championship match to be over in the 6th frame, but it was.
But that's a beautiful thing right there.
Oh, it was a beautiful thing for me. He hated me after that, but I didn't do the lanes. They were having some issues at that time. But it's just that's how much things changed even back then, and that was kind of just when resin was getting started. Ryan Schaefer was on the show throwing an Excalibur. That was the only resin ball on the show. Everybody else was throwing hammers and everything else. But, the point is that show was its own animal. It was a different animal to get there. But, hell, when you got there, Friday night, when it was the most exciting night of the week was Friday night, the last 8 games of match play. And, once you got to the show, it was a big relief. But then again, you had to start all over again. All those pins were gone. And now you gotta reboot it. And like I said, Mike can tell you what that's all about.
It's you're right. I mean, there's 100% truth right there. I mean, that's a different perspective. Yet, it's I listen to you talk about that, and it's 100% true. I mean, there was a bunch of guys out there always trying. We'd see a lot of guys with a lot of talent. I saw a ton of guys come through a tour with a lot of talent. Just either didn't have the finances or couldn't stay out there. They couldn't stay out there long enough, which was the finances, or they just didn't have it between their ears to be able to, help themselves, especially when it got down the latter stages of the tournament. Because that's when a lot of those guys showed you, they could ratchet it up another level, so to speak. I mean, I watched guys, that happened the last 2 games of qualifying. It happened when guys were going for checks, getting to the finals. It happened in the finals, and it happened the last 8 games of match play. You'd see guys really turn it up. It was fun. It happened a lot.
Like I said, that was the golden. I mean, that was golden times. I mean, that's why Friday nights, I always thought that was the greatest. The last 8 games of match play, that was the greatest part of the tournament because that's when it all came down. That's when it all happened, and that was what it was all about. And at that time, they weren't videotaping then. They weren't filming back then. It was just a TV show. But, man, they missed a lot of the great stuff on that Friday night.
Missed some great matches.
If
you were out there for any period of time, you saw some stuff that just happened in the last 8 games that was just phenomenal.
Yeah.
I saw great bowling. Great bowling. And you talk about Norm Duke, who, in my mind, Norm was always super kind to me. I could ask Norm questions. He was always a technician. He understood. He told me what it was about no thumb, what I was doing with my legs. He said he watched me because at the time both of us were living in Albuquerque. And he figured out something to learn that he wanted to do about booming the lane. And I never really, I didn't know, you know what I mean? It was an anomaly. I wasn't that smart. I just knew that I could cup it up and do that deal, and it was working. But he had tried to break it down, and he did. And he was just a master about different things. He was a thinker, and he was willing to share it. He was just really cool. If I asked him stuff about, hey, when you look at this and you want to curve the front, or if you want to arc, or if you want to get the ball to do this or that, what do you look at? Or he would tell me. I mean, he was just great like that with me, and I'll forever always be grateful to Norm for all that.
And that is true. And back then at that time, there was so many different players on tour, meaning you had your group that was real straight, and then you had the guys who would just knock the holes out of it. And then you had the guys who were kind of in between. And then you had some special people like him who can do a bunch of things. He could throw the knuckle pusser real straight up the lane, or he could jump in and hook the entire lane. I mean, they had some tremendous skills. So you had a lot of, and they would do the lanes out there at times. They would set them up. The boomers would do good, and then the straight players would do good, and then this group would do good, and then that group would do good. But certain guys, like obviously Norm is one of them, he was able to, he could throw it as straight as anybody. And if he had to curve the lane, he could. And that was, now, most of the time now when you see him at this point, when he makes the show, more than likely he's going pretty straight from out. He's developed that terrific straight game. He's not going to compete most of the time against the guys who are two-handed from the middle of the lane. But back in the day, he could hook that ball. Man, he could wrap that hand around that ball, and he could hook that lane as good as anyone. And he was a tactician, and he was terrific. I mean, there's just no doubt. So it was so different. It was so different at that time. And I almost think, they always say the guys nowadays are unbelievable. I don't know. I'm thinking the guys back then, I think their skill level was, because the balls were a little different. The resin balls hadn't quite come around, and to make that ball curve more, you had to do more, and you had to do this and do that. And I don't know. I'm not going to say the guys are more talented these days. I think the guys back then were as talented, if not more talented. It was just a different environment. It was just a different situation. But I mean, talent.
They were oiling lanes once a day. Once a day. Okay.
Yep.
So I mean, you got what you got. I mean, and we were bowling 2 6-game blocks. Mm-hmm. So by the time B squad came around, sometimes, holy smoke, man, they were burning. You know what I mean? You could take a 6-pack of hot dogs out there and fry them up. Just get them close to the foul line, and they'd have been cooked. So it was, and therein, some guys learned how to bowl really good on that. I mean, everybody had their forte, and depending on if you could get more games in when it was your deal, that's how you win tournaments. So you figure out, in the lane turn like this, I'm going to have a pretty good lick here for a while, so I need to get on it. And that's the way a lot of us thought.
Yeah, I mean, I used to have this debate with Ozzy all the time. Is it better to be a master of one thing, or kind of be able to do a lot of things but don't do it okay, or do you want to just be really good at one thing you do, but then when you get it, you better take advantage of it? Because there was a bunch of guys like that. They were really good at what they did, and they didn't. When that shot went a different direction, they were not involved. But boy, let that certain area of the lane spark off that gutter, and they can go straight at it. And it's tough to beat them.
And it was on.
I mean, Bowker, Traber, Soper. I mean, it's tough to beat them.
I was going to say when Butch Soper was just on our show, he was talking about that when he was lined up and the shot fell into his, he knew that he had to throw the ball well because it was his time to shine, so to speak. And with that being said, I think that's going to be a good time to take our second break of the show. When we come back, I think we're going to try to get some road stories out of Mike and talk about his influence on the modern game. Stick around. This week's edition of Bowling Evolved is brought to you by BowlingIllustrated.com and TVSRadioNetwork.com. TVS Network, for over 50 years, bringing you the best in sports broadcasting. Welcome back, bowling fans. Well, we've been chatting with Mike Miller, and I have to say, Mike, this has been a very entertaining conversation so far. And one topic I wanted to bring up, and we talked a little bit about this off the air, was recently many people have been making the comparison of what you did back in your day to the modern influence of two-handed bowling. And we were sharing a few opinions back and forth. And for our audience, tell us a little bit about what you think about two-handed bowling in general and your thoughts on how people perceive you as being sort of an influence on how that came about.
Well, I don't know about two-handed bowling. I know, it's its own animal, so to speak, and it's definitely growing. I mean, as we speak, there are more and more and more doing that. And if they don't change something within the game, it will continue to be that way because they can do things that a lot of folks can't. And the way the lanes break down now is completely different to where you have to be able to manipulate that way. And those guys, I find it unbelievable that a kid can drill 6 urethane balls and come out and win 5 times. I'm not taking anything away from Jesper. It's mind-boggling to me that he can do that. Back in our day, they would have tried every which way they could have to make sure that his ball went 60 feet some week.
Oh yeah.
They would have made sure. They would have made sure that his ball acted weird, just to see how he would have adapted or done something. And now maybe he's that good, and I just don't realize that because I've never seen him bowl enough. Maybe he is that good. I read an article in the Bowler's Journal describing what he does and how he does it and what he sees on the lane, and I've watched him bowl. And, you know, it is impressive when his ball hits the pins. It's incredible. And there's a lot of folks and contemporaries of mine who sing his praises, you know, and I've watched the progression of Belmo, who I thought had a ton of power when I first saw him a while back before he'd ever won. And now I see his natural progression, and I see that it's smoother. He's got more touch. He can do different things. I also see that they have a multitude. The ones that are very good at it, they have a multitude of ways to manipulate tilt, roll, throwing it over the front. The ability that they have pretty much trumps most of what I see a lot of other players and what they can do and their ability to be able to repeat it. Those guys have a huge advantage now. The way tournaments go now with the PBA, it's almost like those guys have a completely different mindset that I haven't been out there to watch enough, but it's almost like they just wait long enough to where the hole blows open, they move to it, and then it's, okay, here I go. You know, they're willing to sacrifice a couple of games if they have to because they know they're going to have the chum nutty there for a while. So, and they're very good at understanding their equipment as well. That's what I can tell. In those short burst tournaments where they're bowling one day, they qualify and they bowl like half a round robin thing and then they're to the show. You know, those are quick things, you know, and they've got to be on it right now. And so the ones that understand that deal and have bowled on it are the ones that seem to be making the most hay with it. I think, as far as I'm concerned, what I did was, I just happened to be the first one. Somebody had to be the first one, and it was me. If it wasn't me, there was going to be somebody else that would have done that. So do I feel fortunate? Of course. That I got to be the first one to win like that I shot 300 like that. But there are many who have done it now afterwards, and these two-handed kids, they're not going away. That's as long as the lanes stay the way they are and the equipment stays the way it is, they're not going away.
Very well put. And, like we've talked about on the show many times, I've had a totally different perspective on two-handed bowling now, especially because of my injuries and having to switch from a traditional down and in player to a two-handed player. And I agree with you to a lot of extent. I think there's some guys that, look, as Eric has said many times, that look absolutely god-awful doing it. And there's some players that are tremendous doing it. And I, have a lot of respect for guys like Osku and Belmonte. And I think it would have been interesting to see if you take them and put them in, like, say, the 1991 PBA National when they're bowling, 55, 60 games and having to go through that, see if they could have lasted, figuring 70, 80 games of practice, whatever the case is. It would have been interesting to see them with that era of equipment on that kind of condition.
I would have to say they would have done just fine. I do believe that. I do, because I know what I had, and those two have a lot more power than I had, and I had a reasonable amount, and they have way more. Now, as far as controlling it, then they probably would just put a little more surface on their ball. I mean, that's what they do, isn't it? They just put more surface to get it to roll earlier in the front.
You being at the right place at the right time. That was about just about everybody at, in any stage of the game. I mean,
Yep.
you excel when you excel. I mean, there's times where, if this guy would have been there, if that guy would have been there, and this guy was around, and I mean, God, how many times can you say, God, I wish,
yeah.
It's true. It's hard to,
It is.
How can I say? Those guys were, sure, you were definitely ahead of your time, but there had to be someone to get it started, and,
there had to be someone. It just happened to be me, and it was me because I didn't have anything to lose.
Correct.
Who was I? You know, I was just a journeyman player that would make the occasional few finals, grab a few checks here and there. I hadn't done much. So the risk for me was not much. The reward was tremendous for me. I mean, it was, I can do this. I was free in my mind to try it. So that's why I think another reason why I think it worked for me is because I didn't have a bunch of chains on me mentally about, I don't know, maybe I should put my thumb in. No, I knew better. I knew I could put my thumb in it and leave 6 weak tens in a game in a heartbeat. You know what I mean? I knew that the 6-pin was going to lay in the gutter. I knew it just wasn't there. So for me to commit to it was easy. Wasn't hard at all. Wasn't hard for me to commit to it. Now, I didn't know what was going to happen for sure after that, but I definitely didn't have any problem saying, yeah, let's do it.
But that's why, again, and like I've said this before, the people who grew up as kids with two-handeds, and that's how they learned how to bowl, and they just got better at it as time went on, I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think it's more impressive when you start out bowling one way, and then you decide to go, you know what, I can't do it this way to be successful. I'm going to take my thumb out, and I'm going to learn to cup it and do this. To me, that's more difficult because you're making a change that into something that you're already pretty good at it, but not where you need to be. And then you take your thumb out and learn to throw it a different way. I think, to me, that's more impressive than someone who has been bowling two-handed since they were a kid, and they just, as they get older, they just get more speed and they get a better feel for it. So, again, nothing for nothing. I think it's more impressive going the other way. In other words, let's just say it's not going to happen. Let's just say Jason Belmonte said, you know what, I've won this way with two hands. I'm going to put my thumb back. I'm going to put my thumb in the ball, and I'm going to learn to be really good throwing it with my thumb in the ball. And if he did that and he started winning, I'd say, man, that guy's just unbelievable. That guy's just unbelievable.
Easy. We would all stand up and go, oh, my God, did you just see Bono?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He looked like Walter Ray.
Exactly. Or so to me, that's, I mean, that would be impressive. But the fact that you grew up that way and you're very good at it, and people told you when you were younger, it's not good, don't do it that way, and you say, no, I'm going to do it this way. And that's how you got better and better at it, and now it's become a phenomenon, basically. Okay, that's terrific, that's great, but you've been doing it your whole life. How about the guys who started one way, and then they said, you know what, I'm about done. I've got to do something, and I know, and you did that. So to me, I mean, I think that's even more impressive, but that's just because that was a big change. It wasn't a little change. It was a big physical change, and you had to look at the lane differently mentally because you had a different rev rate off your hand. It was a completely different feel. So to me, that's more impressive. I just think it is. I mean, and I've told people this at the shop, you know, when they talk about the two-handed players and people who've done this and that, I say, what about the guys who threw it straight and then they took their thumb out and they learned to curve the lane? I think that's unbelievable. Like who? Well, how about Mike Miller? Oh yeah, I remember him. Okay, and this conversation would get started. But that to me is pretty impressive stuff. In that, it's not what you always did.
Hold the show 1 second. Hold on. I got to make a notation here. Eric dropped an F-bomb, which I was laughing at. I got to make sure to either bleep that or edit that. So I'm just making a note on our audio log right now. So hold on 1 second. I think that's the first time you've dropped an F-bomb in the history of our show, man.
I think it was.
I got it.
Mike got me going, but that, you know, if you really think about it and you want to analyze it, I think that's more impressive than anything. Anyone, whether it was you or anyone else, to be able to make that change and get good at it and get very good at it and win, shoot 300 doing it, that to me is impressive because you didn't start out that way. You did not start out that way. So to me makes it, no, exactly. So to me that makes it more impressive. In other words, I busted my butt to become a really good player, and I always wanted to go out on tour and bowl against the best. And when I first went out there, I wasn't that good, but I worked and worked and worked and worked, and then I got to a point where I had a couple of really bright moments, but I busted my butt to get there. Granted, I always threw it pretty much the same, but, you know, the left side compared to the right side, it's a little bit different game on both sides, a little different situation. You always want to...
And you have to be ready. And you're left-handed, you have to be ready because you only have so many pops. So
yeah,
when it came your way, you had to be ready.
Yeah, and being a little straighter was not a bad thing on the left. It was a different environment, different topography.
Yeah,
on the right, you had to go around stuff. On the left, being a little straighter was not so bad. A lot of times it was an advantage. But the point is, I had to perfect what I did and then help and do it as good as I can. And it's not the same as throwing it straight and then I said, I'm just going to take my thumb out of it now and cup it and start hooking the lane and get real good at it. That's why I said it's people need to know how impressive it was what Mike did. And nothing for nothing. I mean, I've known Mike a long time, and I'm just saying in that regard, it's phenomenal. Considering what I see the kids running up there with two hands, this is how they started to bowl. And if they get good at it, like the ones who get good at it, okay, terrific, great, that's great. But try making that change from one hand to no thumb to cupping it to hook. I mean, that to me that's a lot of hard work and dedication, and that's not easy to do. Yeah.
I would agree wholeheartedly with Eric. And it's funny, Eric. We talked about this before, but recently I was bowling just in league, and I had someone come up to me and they were inquiring about even my change going from one hand to the two hand. Now, granted, going from a 230 average to a 190 average might not seem that impressive, but changing everything I've ever done for the last, let's say the last 15 years, I've done one style, since I've been in my teens. It is a drastic change, and I couldn't even fathom to do it on the national level. So, no, Mike, I think it's an incredible feat. And with that being said, though, we are closing in on the end of the show. And before we let you go, Mike, I do want to hear at least one PG-13 road story about you and a younger Eric Forkel, because I know there's got to be at least one you can share with our audience.
Well, okay, I'll tell you one. We were, I think we were in, it was somewhere back east. I want to say we were either on Long Island or somewhere. And another one, my roommates, Billy Myers Jr., and we were all friends, and Darren Long and Eric, and we were all going to make dinner. And I think we had invited Eric. Hey, why don't you come on out and we'll make some steaks? And I was trying to be buddy with Eric because it wasn't too much. Maybe a year earlier, I had tamped a cigar in one of his thumb holes. He had worked his thumb hole out. I mean, he had taken 45 minutes in the paddock. I think we were in Louisville. We were in Louisville, and we were all in the paddock in there, and I was in there with my stogie, thinking I was cool, and blah, blah, blah. And he goes, what are you going to do with that? And, Eric, just quiet over there working his thumb hole out. And I said, I'm going to tap it in his thumb hole when he leaves, Eric was so bad the next morning. Oh, my God.
I can remember that thing. It's funny. I remember that because I came in the next morning. I'd work out these balls, get ready for the next block. I open up my bag. I'm like, what the hell is this in my thumb?
What the hell is that?
It was this stogie stuffed in there wet from overnight. So now I got to run back into the locker room. I got to clean it out. And I'm like, I'm going to kill him. I said, but that's okay. I said, it's all right. It's okay. It's Miller. I said, it's Miller, and it's funny, and it's okay. And I was angry at first, then I started laughing, and then, it was always, I got to say, with Mike was, besides Joe Hutchinson and Charlie Tapp, and there was a few guys on tour that could really make
Those guys
laugh.
were the kings. Those guys were the kings of comedy.
Well, I'll tell you, they were really good, and I'm going to start this last story, and it's actually it's a good story. It's kind of a funny story, and it's one that I've told many times at the shop. And we were bowling at John Mazza's place in Bay City. It was a summer stop, and it was warm. And what they did is they put a tent next to the bowling center, so the locker room was outside the bowling center. And when you get done, you go out and put all your stuff in there. And it was Pro-Am day, and the bowlers would go in there and get ready for the next squad. You take your shirt off and you're getting ready. And
oh no!
And there's a bowler from Bad Cheese. His name is Steve Stein.
Steve Stein
was a good bowler, just a guy but really quiet, unassuming when the tour.
Very nice guy, super nice guy.
when the tour was back east, guys would, show up and bowl. Not the guys who were out there every week, but anyways. So we're back there, and he got chosen. He got into a pro-am, and we're all sitting in the locker room getting ready for the next squad. And Stein comes in, and he comes strolling over to his bag, and he takes his shirt off to put on his regular shirt. Well, my Lord, when he takes his shirt off, he's got more hair on his back than I stood there and I looked at Rich Wolf, and I said, look at that. Look at how much hair he's got. And him and I started laughing. Well, all of a sudden, we hear this guy, we hear this wolf sound. We hear this sound of a wolf. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And all of a sudden, I look over, and there's Miller. He's basically up on all fours, and he's acting like a wolf. And he's literally howling, and I have never laughed so hard in my life. And Steve, he's not doing anything. He's just putting his shirt on, and he's oblivious to Miller.
Yeah, he never tapped or turned around.
No.
He was cool. I mean, he didn't know. He had no clue that I was over there doing the werewolf thing, He
was doing this werewolf, and I mean, he was howling. You were up on all fours, and you were howling like the moon. And I'll tell you what, it was. My Lord, that's like 20 years ago, and it's still as plain as day in my mind. And I tell you, I laugh every time I think about it. I laugh so hard. And I had a chance to talk to Rich about 6 months ago, and we were just talking a little. We brought that up, and it just laughed, and it was just. I mean, that was a little more of the PG version of a lot of the things that Mike used to do, and Mike had a very unique way of keeping everybody loose out there, and it was his own. He walked an interesting line out there when it came to some of the things.
Goofy. I tried to be goofy.
Goofy. Yes.
Crazy.
Do you remember in Latham up at the Parker Bone Open?
Oh yeah.
Had the
that was.
Do you remember?
That was the one in the paddock where.
Remember in the paddock?
They were cool. They had lanes They had lanes in the paddock for it. They had sectioned off a whole part of the house.
Yeah.
And so there were 4 to 6 lanes. You could actually throw shots in there after you worked your ball out. So it was actually cool. And I'm in there, and it's in between blocks, and there's not a whole lot going on. And I had, of course, was in my RV, so I walked in there. Most of the time, they wanted us in slacks at all times. Slacks in the sport, they didn't want us looking bad at all. But if you went in the paddock, you had to go in the back way if you had jeans on. Workout bowling balls was dirty and blah blah blah. So I was in there in my jeans and a nice shirt, and I got through working my ball out, and I asked her, I said, hey, is it okay if I just throw a couple? It's back here, it's behind the curtain. And he goes, no, you can't do it. You can't bowl in jeans, blah, blah, blah. I told you guys. I'm tired of telling you guys. And so I was like, okay, cool. So that's fine. So he walked out of there, and I went, well, if I can't bowl in my jeans, I can certainly bowl without them. And I was in there running shots in my skivvies, and I did try one. I did try one in the ball.
Yes!
I will tell you, I definitely didn't strike, but that's not something I recommend. I'm not anything, the movies with me like that. So it's a dangerous thing to be doing that. And it was probably after we were all laughing in there and goofing around. I put my, got my stuff, got dressed right away. And it was about 3 to 4 minutes. The lady got on the center, brought in 2 sponsors that were sponsoring. This is our paddock, and this is where the guys work out. Oh man, I mean, I would have been in serious trouble. Serious trouble. So I gotta say that those are fantastic. And ladies and gentlemen, I gotta calm down. That's funny. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking to.
Oh no, we're not done. I'm not done. I got one more.
I got one. Okay, we got 5 minutes remaining here, Eric. So let's hit a good one.
One more. I can remember we were bowling up in Portland, up in the Hollywood Bowl, up in Portland, Oregon. Mike was bowling, and Rich and I, every time if Mike was bowling, Rich and I, we had to go watch because kind of never knew what was going to happen with Mike when he was bowling. He was either, going to strike a lot or maybe he was struggling, but it was always kind of fun to watch, just like it was always kind of fun to go watch Hugh Miller bowl, because if Hugh wasn't bowling well, he would snap and do something crazy, and
absolutely.
It was kind of fun to watch these guys melt down. Well, Mike didn't really melt down. He would just do some really strange, bizarre things. So Mike was bowling like on 1 and 2 or 3 and 4 at the Hollywood Bowl in Portland, Oregon. And it was a summer stop, and I guess things weren't going so well and what have you. And I got to try to say this in the right light to make it not so bad. He's bowling, and he wasn't bowling too well, and Rich and I were watching, and he says, "Do you think it's time for me to change balls?" And I said to Rich, I said, "Well, why would he be asking us if he wants to change balls?" He says, "I don't know." And so I kind of looked at him. I said, "Mike, change whatever you want." So, would you like to finish this, Mike?
Yeah, and this may have happened in Portland, but the original story was in Austin.
Okay.
And the original
I saw it in
one.
Portland. I don't know about Austin, but I just
Portland.
saw it
It happened too. I'm sure. I thought I was funny, but the original one that was in. Yeah, well, the original one was in Austin, where the upper deck where the fan set was a lot higher than where we were in the bowlers area. It's almost like your head was barely above, so they couldn't see down there what was going on. They could see the bowlers in the settee, but that one little midsection, you couldn't tell. So as I was crossing pairs, I was following Couch. And Couch was usually 2 frames late. They were whatever. We were just catching them. So I get over about the 3rd or 4th game. I'm not really bowling that great. Jason's bowling pretty decent. And I'm standing there, and I asked him straight up, I said, "Do you think I should change balls?" And he goes, "I don't know, Mike. And really, I don't care. I'm bowling here, And so I'm laughing. I didn't say anything. I did not say a thing, right? And meanwhile, I did have a ball out. I had a ball out. So we'll just leave it at that. And and it
was not a bowling ball.
It wasn't a bowling ball. So now he's not looking at me or anything. And he gets up, and he comes back from the 9th frame, and I go, "Dude, do you think I should change balls or what?" And he goes, "I don't know. I don't care." And I looked down, and he went, "You sick, la, 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 la." and then he got up to the frame and went double nuts. He got like 6 and 1. He was so burning mad. He turned like 250 to 210 or whatever it was. And those guys were laughing so hard. And he laughed hard too later. But I'm telling you,
that was in Austin.
Between all of us, man.
It happened again. It happened again in Portland, and I only saw it in Portland. And I remember saying to Rich, I said, "Is that what I think it is?" He said, "Absolutely." And it was just like, so he switched balls. He put the other one back in and took the other one out and let it hang out. I'm like, wow, that's pretty amazing how you can bowl that way.
But you know what?
What am I going to tell you?
I could no more. Holy smoke! I'd gone to jail. I'd have probably gone to jail now. So
probably.
You could no more do that in the Man on the Moon.
No, that was just one of the. That's just. There's so many, and that's about as far as we can go with them. And another one of our shows, I'll fill in a couple more down the road. I'll give you a couple more.
I just got to say, I don't think you can get a really good rev rate on those balls. I'm just throwing that out there.
No, I think I will, and I don't know if they were dull or shiny, but it didn't matter. But the point is, they were out. But they were out.
It definitely didn't matter. And what's sad about this conversation is that it's degenerated to this. And usually these conversations did when I was involved, unfortunately. I can't. I'd like to say I had something better to talk about.
Like I said, it was fun. Those were some unbelievably fun times. Sounds goofy and maybe a little childish. But you know what? In the middle of everything, I can remember all the bowling out there, but it's all the things like that stuff like that I will never forget. I mean, how can you forget it? It's just so funny. And Mike was definitely not only a great player, but he was also incredibly funny in that way, and he kept the guys loose. And, you know, there's just certain people and characters of the tour that you'll never forget. You know, like I said, Mike and Joe Hutchison and Charlie Tapp, and I mean, there are certain guys out there who were very funny. I mean, they would just have that, you know, and they were carefree, and they just didn't care, you know, and they just whatever it was, and you know, and like I said, and that was part of the beauty of the tour, in my opinion, back then.
It's so lucky to be able to have done that for as long as we got to do it, Eric, and yeah, I missed that.
Oh yeah,
so it's really nice
like
to talk
I said,
about it.
it was like I said, it was not only fun, but it was a blessing to be able to do it. It really was.
Absolutely.
Well, guys, I hate to cut this short, but unfortunately we are at the end of our show. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been talking to the immeasurable Mike Miller, and from thumbless bowling to pantsless bowling, I have to say this has been a very unique interview. I also want to say thank you so much for appearing on the show. I would love to have you on in the future as well.
Well, thank you. It was just a fantastic time just to reminisce about things and talk about bowling. There's so much to talk about with bowling, and bowling is a great sport. It's been around. I've been involved pretty much my whole life with it, my family too, and I'm just grateful that bowling has been there because I've been able to make a reasonable living at it, and so I'm lucky.
And by the way, Dustin, you know, Mike's sister, Dana, she's one of the all-time great women bowlers of all time. You know, and besides that, just a terrific human being. She's just a sweetheart, and there's just a great bowling family there. And, you know, it's just a lot of talent in the family. And
she made it tough, I tell you. She definitely made it tough on me. That's for sure.
I bet. Yeah, there's a lot to live up to there. She was terrific. Terrific.
Well, she definitely was a player.
Oh.
Well, like I said, I definitely want to say, guys, thank you for allowing me to be part of this conversation. It was a real honor to be in on this one, and I know for our fans at home this has been a tremendous treat. But, ladies and gentlemen, that does take us into the end of the show. We want to say thank you once again to Mr. Mike Miller again for appearing on the show. Also, a big thank you to all of our sponsors, Mongoose Products and RealBowlersTape.com, Elite Pro Shop AZ, Riverside Lane, Finley Motor Company, MotiveBowling.com, and, of course, to all of our listeners, thank you so much for keeping us on the air. Controversial or not, we're here to have a good time. We're the talk show by Real Bowlers for Real Bowlers here on the gem along the Colorado River. And for my partner, Eric Forkel, and our guest, Mike Miller, I've been Dustin J. Markowitz. Have a great night.
Good night.
Good night.